They say beauty can open doors, but in Kutiala there was a beauty that brought only ruin. Oulagna was admired like the sunrise, yet feared like a coming storm. Her laughter crushed hearts, and her pride rose higher than the tallest baobab. But one day, even the spirits turned their faces away from her. What sin could make a god descend in anger against a single woman? If this story intrigues you, tell us where you're watching from. In every village, there is a child whom people call a blessing before the child even learns to speak. In the village of Kutiala, that child was Ulagna. She was born on a morning when the sky burned gold, and the elders said the sun itself had paused to witness her arrival. Her mother Sira held her close and whispered, "This one will be different," and indeed she was. And as Ulagna grew, her beauty unfolded like a secret the world could not keep. Her skin carried the deep glow of polished mahogany. Her eyes shone like dark rivers under moonlight, and her smile. Her smile was enough to make even the most hardened trader forget his purpose in the market. Women would stop grinding millet just to watch her pass. Children followed her like shadows. Men spoke her name in hushed admiration. She is not just beautiful, they would say. She is chosen. At first, Ulagna did not understand the weight of their words. She ran barefoot like the other children, laughed under the same trees, and shared roasted yams without hesitation. But as the years stretched and her beauty sharpened into something undeniable, the world around her began to change, and so did she. It started with small things. When other girls braided their hair, they would look to Oulagna for approval. When they dressed for festivals, they compared themselves to her and fell silent when they saw her arrive. Compliments followed her like a drumbeat that never stopped. "You are the most beautiful girl in Kotiala. No, in all the villages beyond the river. No, in all the land." At first, she would smile shyly, but slowly, that smile grew into something else, something heavier, something colder. One afternoon, as she stood near the market well, a young girl named Nadia approached her, her hands trembling slightly. "Oulagna," Nadia said softly, "will you help me choose beads for the festival? I want to look at least a little like you." Oulagna looked at her from head to toe, her gaze slow and deliberate. "You," she said, her voice light but sharp. "You could wear all the beads in the world, Nadia, and still not come close." The words fell like stones. Nadia lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the small pouch she carried. She said nothing more and walked away, but the silence she left behind was louder than any insult. Some women nearby exchanged uneasy glances. "She speaks too harshly," one whispered. "She is young," another replied. "She will learn." But not everyone believed that. At home, Sira began to notice the change in her daughter. One evening, as they sat outside their compound, she spoke gently. "My child," she said, "beauty is like fire. It can warm your hands, but it can also burn your house if you are not careful." Ulagna laughed softly, brushing her braids over her shoulder. "Mother," she replied, "people only fear what they cannot have. If they feel burned, it is because they are too close to something greater than them." Sira's smile faded, but she said no more. Soon word of Ulagna's beauty spread beyond Kutiala. From distant villages, young men began to arrive, sons of farmers, traders, even minor chiefs, each hoping to win her favor. They came bearing gifts, woven cloth, carved bracelets, baskets of kola nuts. And each time Ulagna would stand before them tall and unbending her eyes, scanning them not with curiosity but with judgment. One man, tall and strong, stepped forward and said, "Ulagna, I have crossed 3 rivers to stand before you. I ask only for a chance to know your heart." Ulagna tilted her head, studying him as one might study an ordinary object. "You have crossed 3 rivers," she said slowly, "but you have not crossed into worthiness." A ripple of discomfort passed through the watching crowd. Another suitor tried. And another, each one left with his dignity, stripped away his hope, crushed under the weight of her words. At first, the villagers still admired her. But admiration, like milk under the sun, does not stay sweet forever. Something had begun to change in Coachella. And though Ulagna could not yet see it, the same voices that once praised her were beginning to whisper not in awe but in unease. For beauty, when it forgets humility, does not remain a blessing for long. They say the tongue can wound deeper than a spear, and in Coachella people were beginning to feel the sharp edge of Ulagna's words. The market once filled with laughter and the hum of friendly bargaining slowly became a stage for her cruelty. Wherever Ulagna walked, conversations shifted. Some voices grew softer, others disappeared altogether. Yet she did not notice, or perhaps she no longer cared. One bright market day, when the air smelled of roasted maize and palm oil, Ulagna arrived, dressed in a flowing cloth of deep crimson her braids, adorned with golden beads that caught the sun like fire. As always, eyes turned toward her. "She shines like royalty," someone whispered. But admiration now carried a trace of tension. Near the spice stalls stood Nadia, the same gentle girl whose heart had once been bruised by Ulagna's careless words. She had come with her aunt to sell ground pepper, her hand steady, despite the lingering memory of that humiliation. When Ulagna approached, Nadia lowered her gaze out of respect. Ulagna she greeted softly. But Ulagna did not pass quietly. She stopped, and when she stopped, the market seemed to hold its breath. "You still look like that," Ulagna said, her voice carrying just enough for others to hear. "I thought time might have been kind to you." A few people turned away, pretending not to listen. Nadia swallowed her voice, trembling but steady. "I am as I was made." Ulagna smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then whoever made you lacked imagination." A sharp silence followed. Nadia's aunt stepped forward, anger flickering in her eyes. "Beauty is not only in the face, child," she said firmly. "It lives in the heart." Ulagna turned slowly toward her, her expression unchanged. "Then perhaps," she replied, "that is where people like you must hide it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was no longer a careless remark. It was deliberate cutting and meant to wound. From that day on, the stories grew. She mocked an elder. She made a child cry. She laughed at a woman whose husband had just died. Each story carried a weight heavier than the last. One evening, under the wide branches of the baobab tree, where elders gathered, Baba Kande, the village's oldest and most respected spiritual guide, listened quietly as people spoke of Ulagna. His face, lined like dry earth after a long drought, revealed little. But when the voices fell silent, he spoke. "A tree that grows too tall without bending will break when the wind comes," he said. The next day he sent for Ulagna. She arrived at the shrine with the same confidence she carried everywhere. Her steps light, her chin raised. The sacred space filled with carved figures, and the faint scent of burning herbs seemed to hum with a quiet warning. Baba Kande watched her closely. "Child," he began, his voice calm but firm, "the beauty you carry is not yours alone. It is a gift, and every gift demands respect." Ulagna folded her arms unimpressed. "Respect," she echoed. "From whom? From the people, from the spirits, from the balance that holds this world together." She let out a soft laugh. "The people admire me," she said, "and the spirits, if they exist, have given me no reason to fear them." Baba Kande's gaze sharpened. "You speak as though you stand above all things." "Perhaps I do," she replied simply. The air in the shrine grew heavier, as if something unseen had drawn closer. "There are forces," Baba Kande said slowly, "that do not announce themselves before they act. Pride invites them. Arrogance feeds them." Ulagna stepped forward, her eyes steady. "Then let them come," she said. "I will not bow to what I cannot see." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Baba Kande lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in sorrow. "Even the blind feel the sun when it burns," he murmured. But Ulagna had already turned away. As she walked out of the shrine, the wind stirred the dust at her feet, swirling in restless patterns. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beat faltered, then stopped. And though no one in Coachella could yet name it, something had shifted. the kind of shift that does not announce itself with thunder, but with quiet, inevitable consequence. They say not all wounds bleed where the eye can see, and in Kutiala, the deepest wound was about to be carved not by a blade but by a heart too proud to feel. Among the many who had heard of Oulagna's beauty was a man named Amadu. Amadu was not the richest man, nor the most striking. His hands were rough from years of farming, his shoulders broad from labor beneath the relentless sun. But his name carried something more valuable than gold respect. He is a man of honor, the elders would say. He keeps his word even when no one is watching. Unlike the others, Amadu did not rush to Kutiala with gifts meant to impress. He came quietly walking the dusty road with steady steps, guided not by pride, but by something deeper hope. The first time he saw Ulagna, she stood near the well, her laughter drifting across the compound like music. For a moment, even Amadu felt the pull of her beauty. But it was not her face that held him, it was the thought of what kind of heart could carry such light. I will speak to her, he told himself. Days passed before he gathered the courage. When he finally approached, the village seemed to sense something different. There was no display, no crowd of admirers, no performance. Just a man standing before a woman speaking plainly. Ulagna, he said, his voice calm but sincere. I have heard many things about you. Some speak of your beauty, others of your strengths. But I have come to know you for myself. Ulagna looked at him, her expression unreadable. You are not like the others, she said. I am not here to impress you, Amadu replied. I am here because I believe a life built on respect and truth is stronger than one built on admiration alone. A few villagers nearby exchanged curious glances. Ulagna tilted her head slightly. And you believe I need that, she asked. I believe everyone does, he answered. For a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes, something uncertain, something almost human, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Days turned into weeks, and Amadu remained in Kutiala. He worked alongside the villagers, helped repair fences, shared food with those in need. Slowly, people began to admire him, not for what he said, but for what he did. Even Oulagna could not ignore him. One evening, as the sky burned orange and purple, Amadu stood before her once more. I will not pretend to be what I am not, he said. But I know this, I would honor you not for your beauty, but for who you choose to be. The words hung in the air. For a moment, the village seemed to lean closer, waiting. Then Ulagna laughed. It was not the soft laughter of amusement, but something sharper, colder. Honor me, she repeated. You speak as though I am in need of something you can give. Amadu's expression did not change, but those who watched saw the tension in his jaw. I offer what is mine, he said quietly. Nothing more. Ulagna stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with something dangerous. And what is that, she asked. Loyalty, respect, a life built together. She shook her head slowly. You bring me words, she said, her voice rising just enough for others to hear. But words do not make a man worthy. A murmur spread through the crowd. Amadu stood still. And what does he ask? Ulagna's gaze swept over him, deliberate and cutting. Power, wealth, presence, she said. Things you do not have. The silence that followed was heavy. But perhaps, she added, her lips curling slightly, you thought your humility would impress me. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Amadu lowered his eyes for a brief moment, not in shame but in acceptance. I thought, he said softly, that truth might matter more. Oh, Ulagna turned away. Then you thought wrong. The words fell like a final blow. Amadu stood there for a moment longer, then nodded once as if sealing something within himself. Without another word, he walked away. That night, the village did not speak loudly. Fires burned low, and conversations were hushed. She has gone too far, someone whispered. Even kindness is no longer safe from her, another replied. And somewhere beyond the visible world, where silence listens and pride echoes, something stirred. For it is said that when a heart rejects truth with arrogance, it does not only wound a man, It calls upon forces that do not forgive easily. They say when the world grows too quiet around a person, it is not always peace that surrounds them, but something waiting. After the day Amadu walked away, a strange stillness settled over Kotiala. It was not the calm of a resting village, nor the silence of night. It was something heavier, like the air before a storm that refuses to break. At first, only a few noticed. The drums that once echoed through the evenings began to falter. The laughter of children felt distant, as though carried away by an unseen wind. Even the birds, which had always gathered near the great baobab, seemed to keep their distance. And at the center of it all stood Ulagna, unchanged in appearance, but somehow alone. She noticed it in small ways. Women no longer rushed to greet her. Conversations stopped when she approached, then resumed in hushed tones after she passed. Even the young girls who once followed her now lingered at a distance, watching with uncertain eyes. Ulagna frowned, brushing aside the feeling. "They are jealous," she muttered to herself. Nothing more. But the night told a different story. Sleep, once effortless, began to slip away from her. When she did close her eyes, her dreams were restless, filled with shifting shadows, distant whispers, and a presence she could not name. One night, she awoke suddenly, her breath shallow. In the silence of her room, she heard it. A voice, not loud, not clear, but unmistakable. "Come." Ulagna sat upright, her heart pounding. "Who is there?" she demanded. There was no answer, only the faint rustle of wind against the walls. She rose slowly, stepping outside. The village lay still beneath the moon, but her eyes were drawn toward one place, the shrine. A place she had walked away from without a second thought. Now something pulled her back. By morning, word had already spread. "The shrine has called her," people whispered. She must go. Even Sira, her mother, approached her with concern. "My child," she said softly, "when the shrine calls, you do not ignore it. Go with humility." Ulagna lifted her chin. "I will go," she replied, "but not because I fear it." The path to the shrine felt longer than before. The trees that lined the way seemed to lean inward, their branches casting long, reaching shadows across the ground. When she arrived, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs. Inside, Baba Kande was not alone. Beside him stood a woman, unlike any Ulagna had seen before. A priestess, her face calm, yet distant, her eyes holding a depth that felt ancient. "Ulagna," Baba Kande said quietly, "you have been called." Ulagna stepped forward, her gaze steady. "Then let whatever wishes to speak, speak," she said. The priestess lifted her hand, and for a moment the flickering light of the shrine seemed to still. "You stand at the edge of something you do not understand," the priestess said, her voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. "Your beauty has been given, but your heart has turned it into a weapon." Ulagna's lips curved slightly. "If others are wounded," she replied, "it is because they are weak." A faint ripple passed through the air, as though the shrine itself reacted. The priestess did not raise her voice. "Pride blinds the soul," she said, "and when the soul cannot see, it walks toward its own destruction." Ulagna took another step forward. "Then I will walk it with my head high," she said. "I will not bow to fear, nor to voices that hide behind shadows." Baba Kande closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing for what would follow. "This is not fear," he said. "This is warning." "Then I reject it," Ulagna answered without hesitation. The priestess lowered her hand slowly. "So be it," she said. The words did not sound like anger. They sounded like judgment. The flames in the shrine flickered violently for a brief moment, casting strange shapes along the walls, shapes that twisted and shifted like something alive. "You will learn," the priestess added, her gaze unwavering, "that what is given can be taken." Ulagna's expression did not change. "Then let it be taken," she said, for a heartbeat silence consumed the shrine. Then the wind rose outside, sudden and sharp, rattling the carved figures and stirring the ashes of the sacred fire. Ulagna turned and walked away, her steps firm, her posture unbroken. But behind her, Baba Kande whispered, barely audible, "The gods do not argue. They act, and far beyond the sight of men, something had already begun. They say when a curse begins, it does not arrive like thunder. It comes quietly like a crack in a calabash, small at first, but certain to spread." For Ulagna, the change began the very next morning. She stood before a polished piece of metal, the closest thing she had to a mirror, adjusting the beads in her braids. As always, she expected to see perfection staring back at her, but something was different. At first, she could not name it. Her skin still held its glow. Her eyes still reflected the same dark brilliance, and yet there was a faint dullness so slight it could have been imagined. Ulagna frowned. "It is nothing," she whispered. She stepped outside, lifting her chin as she always did, ready to meet the eyes of those who would admire her. But the response she received was not what she expected. A group of women paused in their conversation as she approached, but instead of smiles, there was hesitation. "Good morning," one of them said, her tone polite but distant. Ulagna slowed her steps. "Good morning," she replied, her voice controlled. But as she passed, she heard it. "She looks tired." "No, not tired. Something else." The words were quiet, but they struck her harder than any shout. Ulagna kept walking. By the time she reached the market, the unease had grown. Usually, her presence would turn heads instantly. But now people looked, then quickly looked away, as if unsure of what they had seen. She moved between the stalls, her eyes searching, her mind racing. "What is wrong with them?" she muttered. Near the cloth merchants, she caught sight of herself again in a polished surface. This time, she saw it clearly. A faint shadow beneath her eyes. A slight dryness in her skin. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else might notice immediately. But to Ulagna, it was unthinkable. Her breath caught. "No." She touched her face as if to confirm what she saw. This cannot be happening. That night, she did not sleep. She washed her face again and again, applied oils, adjusted her hair, searched for any trace of the flaw she had seen. But the more she looked, the more it seemed to grow, not in size, but in presence. The next day, the whispers were louder. "She is not as radiant as before. Something has changed." Did you see her eyes? Ulagna felt the ground beneath her shifting. And with that shift came something new: fear. Not the fear of others, but the fear of losing what she believed defined her. She became restless. Where she once walked with calm confidence, she now moved with urgency. She spoke louder, laughed sharper, forced attention where it no longer came naturally. "Look at me," her actions seemed to say. But the more she reached for admiration, the further it slipped away. One afternoon, she passed by a group of young girls. Once they would have run toward her, eager for her approval. Now they stepped aside. One of them whispered not quietly enough, "She's not like before." Ulagna stopped. "What did you say?" she demanded. The girls froze. I said nothing," one stammered. Ulagna stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You think I cannot hear you," she said. "You think you can speak about me like that?" The girls shook their heads, fear in their eyes. But instead of satisfaction, Ulagna felt something else rising within her, a tightening in her chest, a trembling she could not control. She turned away abruptly. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ulagna returned to her compound. Her movements were sharp, restless. Sira watched her quietly. "My child," her mother said gently, "something is troubling you." "Nothing is troubling me," Ulagna snapped. Sira did not argue, but her eyes lingered on her daughter's face longer than usual. Later that night, Ulagna sat alone. The village sounds had faded, leaving only the soft hum of the wind. She closed her eyes, but instead of rest, she felt it again. That presence, closer now, watching, waiting. Her breath quickened. "No," she whispered into the darkness. "I am still Ulagna. Nothing has changed." But deep within her, where truth cannot be silenced, a voice answered, "Everything has." And as the night stretched on the crack in the calabash, widened, quiet, unseen, but impossible to stop. They say when a person builds their life on what can be taken, the day it is taken feels like the end of the world. For Ulagna, that day arrived, not with a single blow, but with a slow, merciless unraveling. Within weeks, the changes could no longer be hidden. The glow that once defined her had faded into a dull, uneven tone. Her eyes, once bright like river water under sunlight, now carried a heaviness that no oil or rest could disguise. Even her posture, once proud and effortless, had begun to bend under a weight no one else could see. And the village no longer whispered, it spoke. She has been touched by something. This is not ordinary. The shrine warned her. Each word circled her like vultures. Ulagna tried everything. She woke before dawn, bathing in herbal mixtures, visiting distant healers, seeking remedies whispered about in forgotten corners of the land. She braided her hair tighter, adorned herself with brighter cloth, stood taller, spoke louder, but nothing returned what had been taken. And worse, people no longer looked at her with admiration, they looked with pity. One afternoon as she walked through the market, she caught her reflection once more, but this time she did not see a flaw. She saw a stranger. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she reached out, as though touching the image might restore it. But the face that stared back remained unchanged, ordinary, tired, human. For the first time in her life, Ulagna felt invisible. And in that invisibility, something inside her began to collapse. That evening, as the sun sank low, she wandered toward the edge of the village, her steps slow, uncertain. The path led her to a place she had once ignored, the very shrine she had rejected. But she was not alone. Standing near the entrance was Nadia, the same girl she had once humiliated. Nadia turned as she approached, her expression calm, not proud, not bitter, but steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ulagna broke the silence. "Do you see it too?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nadia studied her carefully. "I see what remains," she said. The words were gentle, but they cut deeper than any insult. Ulagna's lips trembled. Everything, she said, her voice cracking. "And now, I am nothing." Nadia shook her head slowly. "You were never everything," she replied. "And you are not nothing. You are simply what you chose to be." Ulagna lowered her gaze. For the first time, there was no defense, no pride, no sharp words waiting to strike, only silence. Footsteps approached behind them. It was Amadu. He stopped a few paces away, his presence calm as ever. But there was no judgment in his eyes, only quiet understanding. Ulagna looked at him, shame washing over her. "I wronged you," she said, her voice unsteady. "I wronged many." Amadu nodded once. "Yes," he said. The honesty of it struck her harder than anger would have. "I did not see," she continued, tears forming in her eyes. "I thought I was above everyone, above everything." "And now?" Amadu asked. She hesitated. "Now I see that I built myself on something that was never mine to keep." The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of the shrine. From within, the priestess stepped forward once more, her presence quiet but commanding. "The lesson has come," she said. Ulagna turned toward her, her knees weakening. "Please," she whispered, "take it back. Restore what I was." The priestess's gaze remained steady. "What you were," she said, "was never the truth." Ulagna's tears fell freely now. "Then give me another chance," she pleaded. "I will change. I will be different." The priestess did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked beyond Ulagna, to the people. She had hurt the lives she had touched with cruelty. "The punishment was never only your loss of beauty," she said at last. "It was the stripping away of illusion." Ulagna's breath trembled. "And what remains?" she asked. The priestess stepped aside, slightly revealing the path behind her. "That," she said, "is yours to decide." For the first time, Ulagna stood without pride, without power, without certainty, only with truth. And in that truth, her real trial had just begun. They say, when the storm has passed, it leaves behind two things: what was destroyed and what must be rebuilt. In Kotiala, the story of Oulagna did not end with her fall. It began again with silence, with humility, and with a truth that could no longer be hidden. In the days that followed, Ulagna did not return to the market as she once had. She no longer walked with her chin raised, nor did she seek the eyes of others. Instead, she moved quietly through the village, her presence no longer commanding attention, but slowly earning something else: understanding. At first, people watched from a distance. "Is this the same Ulagna?" they whispered. "She has changed," others replied. But change, as the elders say, is not proven by words. It is proven by actions repeated when no one is watching. And so Ulagna began. She helped women carry water from the well, her hands unaccustomed but determined. She sat with children teaching them songs instead of seeking their admiration. She worked in the fields under the same sun that once seemed beneath her, her skin darkening, her body tiring, but her spirit softening. The first time she approached Nadia again, it was not with pride, it was with lowered eyes. "I cannot undo what I said," Ulagna told her quietly. "But I ask, not for forgiveness I do not deserve, only for the chance to be better than I was." Nadia studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded, not with full forgiveness, but with acceptance. "That is where all change begins," she said. With Amadu, the silence was different. He did not avoid her, but neither did he step closer. Respect once broken does not return quickly. One evening, as they worked side by side repairing a fence, Ulagna spoke. "I once believed I had everything," she said. Amadu continued his work, and now he asked. She paused. "Now I know I had nothing that could last." Amadu nodded slowly. "What lasts," he said, "is not what people see. It is what they feel when you are gone." The words settled deep within her. And for the first time, Ulagna understood the kind of beauty she had never possessed. The shrine remained silent. The priestess did not return. The gods, it seemed, had already spoken. Seasons passed, and though Ulagna's physical beauty never returned to what it once was, something else began to grow, something quieter but far stronger. People no longer spoke her name in awe, they spoke it in reflection. She was the most beautiful, they would say, and she lost it all. Then they would add, but she found something greater. Children who never knew her former glory saw only a woman who worked hard, who spoke kindly, who listened more than she spoke. And perhaps that was the greatest transformation of all. For beauty that fades teaches a lesson, but character that grows leaves a legacy. In time, Ulagna herself would sit beneath the great baobab where elders gathered, not as someone admired, but as someone who understood. And when young girls spoke of beauty, she would tell them, "Do not build your worth on what can be taken from you. Build it on what no one can touch." Because pride, as the elders say, is a flame that burns brightest just before it dies. And humility is the water that gives life long after the fire is gone. So if you ever hear the name Ulagna, remember this: it was not her beauty that defined her story. It was what remained after it was gone. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful African folktales.